Hey guys, Fox here, and today we're going to be doing my 2023 USFL season predictions. Now, if you haven't seen my Power Rankings video already, go click the top right of the video so you'll get taken right to the video of Power Rankings, because naturally these predictions are kind of a bit of representation on that, but with a little more of actual thought on going against each other. So I'm going to be doing, unlike last year where I just did each team's record and the playoff stuff, I'm actually going to be doing the team's records in their division. Now, I'm not going to pick each and every game. I'm just going to pick the overall idea of what I think each team will do in their division and against the other division, as well as their records and all that kind of stuff. So without further ado, let's get started with looking at the South in the first team, the Birmingham Stallions. I think the Stallions are going to end up going 7-3 this season. I think they are going to fall back from last year. I think that there's going to be no team as dominant as last year. I think that's mainly because the Generals and the Stallions, both, as I said in my Power Rankings video, while they're still top teams, they lost a lot of talent overall. And I think that this is going to be represented most in the Birmingham versus the North. I think in the South that they're almost good enough to sweep. But just like we saw last year, I think that one team will end up getting them in a rematch. Now, if that's the Showboats, who I think are going to be the second best team in the division, the Breakers, who are the rivals, or the Gamblers, who did it last year, I don't know. But I think one team's going to beat them in the South, and I think they're going to go 2-2 in the North. I think that the Generals are going to get revenge from their opening night loss to them last year by beating them on the first game that they play this year. And then I think that either the Panthers or the Stars are going to beat them in their next game, and then they're going to win the other two. So I think they're going to go 7-3 as my prediction for them. The next team is the Houston Gamblers. I said in the Power Rankings, and I'm going to say it again, I think the Gamblers are by far the worst team in the league. I think a lot of people are overrating them a bit, and I honestly don't see why. The fact is this team had the biggest loss of overall talent. Their entire defense is basically gone. They've regressed at head coach. They regressed at receiver. And the only position that they might be better is really quarterback, which when you look at how much other places is worse and how little the upgrade is, I don't think they're going to be that good. I think they get swept from the North. I think the Maulers beat them again, and I think they lose to all the other teams in the North. And then I think they pull off one game in the South. I think it's so hard to go winless or sweep in your division. I feel like they're going to beat one team, and I honestly see it being the Breakers or the Showboats. Though, might be the Stallions. But I think they're going to go 1-9 and are going to end up finishing as not only the worst team in the South, but the worst team in the league, and probably get the number one overall pick for next year. Next team is the Memphis Showboats. I have them finishing at 5-5, a 500 record. I think they're going to go 2-2 in the North and 3-3 in the South. And I look at the Showboats and I say this team really is kind of bringing back most of the same squad in certain areas and completely different in others. Their line on offense, their offensive line, and the running back group is a bit different, but their best player in John Jones, who was their all-USFL offensive lineman, is back. So their only real good player on the O-line is back. So I think that they're going to be better off, especially considering the fact their quarterback room has a pretty decent ceiling. I think that they're going to end up going 5-5. So it'll be just enough, I think, to probably make them get in the playoffs. But that's also because I think the Breakers are going to go 5-5. Like I said, I do think they had a huge regression in talent, and I don't think they're a top team. But I do think that they still have enough pieces overall. I forgot that they kept Gerard Fernandez, who was a really solid linebacker. But the fact is, their defense is still going to take a huge hit without Davin Bellamy, and their offense is going to take a huge hit without Sal Cannella. And I think that with the other losses they've had, their rushing leader and the other players they had, and the fact is that they have a new coach who I do think is a bit better than Fedora, but it's still a new coach. So that's always going to be a question mark. I don't see this team being awesome. I think that overall the Showboats probably end up getting the tiebreaker due to that home field advantage, as I could definitely see the Showboats end up beating the Breakers in 2 games or 1. I think that both of them, I feel they're going to go 2-2 in the North and 3-3 in the South. I think they'll both beat the Maulers, and then they'll both pull off an upset against one of the top 3 teams in the North. And then I look at the South, and I think the Stallions have a good shot to beat both of them in both games. Like I said, I think the Stallions have really a 33% chance to lose to any of the 3 teams. It's just I don't know which one I'd say. But I think that there's a good chance that one of these teams is going to just get a better division record. And against top teams. I think that's going to be the Showboats. I think the Breakers missed the playoffs at 5-5. Now, as for the North, we start off with the Michigan Panthers. Panthers, I think, go on to almost sweep the South and they go 3-1 with their only loss probably being to the Stallions. I think this team ends up pulling it off against the Showboats and Breakers. But I do think that the Achilles heel is going to be the North. I do see them sweeping the Maulers again. It seems the Panthers just are just out of nowhere play great against them last year, and I think they're going to do the same thing this year. I think they pull off one upset against either the Stars or the Generals, but I don't see them being good enough to be that guaranteed playoff team. I think that the North is just so much better than the South. As I saw in my power rankings, I have 3 of the 4 best teams in the North, and naturally, the Panthers are one of those 3 teams. I think Carson Strong with Mike Nolan. I think that Mike Nolan's going to help bolster the defense, along with, Speaks and Kimdichie being added. And I think that Carson Strong on the offense is going to be able to elevate the offense enough, but I don't think it's going to do enough. And sadly, the Panthers fan in me is saying that this team ain't going to make it to the dance, but they're going to get really close. Now, as for the New Jersey Generals, 7-3. I think they finished 1 game higher than the Panthers, and that's because they'll have 1 game better in the North. I see this team, and I think the Stars are about the same. I see them both basically going 1-for-1 in the Stars and Generals, but I think the Generals end up pulling off another extra win against, the Panthers, and they sweep them potentially. Or they only lose 1 game, whereas I see the Panthers potentially getting swept by one of these teams. I see the Generals being able to sweep them and then just, go 1-for-1 or 0-2. It's just, the North is just, the top 3 in the North is hard to tell because there's always that chance the Maulers do pull off that upset. Even that win against the Gamblers last year was an upset out of nowhere. So I think the Generals end up going 7-3, but I do think they get the top spot in the North because I think that they'll have the better tiebreakers in the division. And that's because I think the Stars also go 7-3, and I also think they go the same records in the North and South, at 3-1 in the South and 4-2 in the North. I think that both teams are going to, like I said, they probably split against each other, and it's just that one of them ends up losing to the Maulers instead of the Panthers, and that ends up, pushing them down, or it comes down to overall tiebreaker, and one of them ends up beating the Stallions, and the other one doesn't. As I think they both have a good shot to lose to the Stallions as well as beat them, but could get upset by a Showboats or a Breakers team. I think the Stars are going to be a solid team, but I can't guarantee that they're going to be the top seed. Even though I do think they're the best team, I think there's a chance that Andrus might rest some players early because of the fact that the season basically ended due to a lot of injuries. Colburn was out. I'm pretty sure Stribling was playing through injury. And naturally, Cookus had that terrible injury in the championship game. So I wouldn't be shocked if the final game of the season comes and they're rocking a 7-2 record, and they already clinched their playoffs. And since they don't have a home field they need to get, especially since, there is no, the top team gets home field advantage, they're already set. I think that he might just, sit a couple of players and be fine losing that last game. That's just my theory. Then the Pittsburgh Maulers, I have them finishing at 2-8 as the second to worst team in the entire league. I think they're going to go 1-5 in the North and 1-3 in the South. Unlike the Gamblers, who I think get swept in their other division, I think the Maulers pull off the win, probably against the Gamblers, like I said. And then in the North, I feel like they're going to play spoiler to either the Stars or the Generals getting the top seed in that division, or they're going to play spoiler and be the reason the Panthers missed the playoffs. I don't think they will, but I think they're probably going to pull off an upset over the Stars or Generals is what I would assume. I know that a lot of people seem to be really high on them. I've seen a lot of people online put them nearly top 4 in their power rankings, having 5 or 4, and I just can't see it. I like Ray Horton over Kirby Wilson, but Kirby wasn't the only problem. Yes, he was the biggest one, but they had no quarterback, and to just think that the guys they got are immediately going to be top tier is just insane. They should have kept Vadley, but instead they let him go, and he got to the Stars. Now, the Stars have a really good backup, which, that's exactly what they needed, another quarterback. But the fact is that the Maulers, when you look at them, it's hard to see that Reuben Foster and Ray Horton is enough to make the defense a top-tier unit. Yes, Tornton is still there, so the defense should be able to get better. I don't see it. I think the Maulers end up going 2-8. I don't really see the Canton being that immediate, great home field advantage that Memphis or Detroit's going to be. So I don't think they get the boost there to get them an extra win. That's my theory. So, in terms of the standings, what the final standings are going to end up looking like in the North is you have at 4th place the 2-8 Maulers, 3rd place the 6-4 Panthers, then at 2nd you have the 7-3 Stars, and the tiebreaker goes to the number 1 team in the New Jersey Generals. Like I said, I think one of them ends up losing a game to the Maulers instead of the Panthers, and that divisional record ends up screwing them over, and they miss out on being the top seed, which isn't the biggest problem, but does happen. But the big tiebreaker comes in the South. I think the 1-9 Gamblers finish at last in the entire league, as well as naturally the South. I think the Breakers at 5-5 finish third, and the Showboats finish 5-5 at second. I think that either the Showboats do pull off 2 wins against the Breakers, or they're the team that gets the upset over the Stallions to, as I said, get that divisional record up, to get the tiebreaker ahead of the Breakers. And then the Stallions get the first seed at 7-3. Now, in terms of which team I think it's the overall 1 seed, I would say probably, like I said, I think the Generals are probably going to pull off the win in week 1. I think that Mike Crowley is coaching them and saying, look, we almost beat them last year. There's a lot of you guys that were here last year. We need to get this win, start the season off. I think the Generals pull off the win in week 1. So I would say my money would go to the Generals to be the number 1 overall seed. And I'm saying that while I think they're third in the power rankings. And the reason for that is in the playoffs. The playoff matchup naturally is going to be the Generals versus the Stars in the North, and then in the South it's going to be Stallions versus Showboats. And in the end, I think that it is a rematch in the title game. I think the Stars, despite it being 2 completely different iterations of the USFL, continue their streak and make it to their 5th consecutive USFL championship game. I think the Stallions make it to their 2nd straight and their 100% of all the new USFL title games. I think the Showboats end up losing. I think that could be another blowout, kind of like the Breakers one was. Whereas I think the Stars Generals is going to be another really close, great game. And I think that it's going to be the Stars versus the Stallions again. Which, yep, the Stars versus the Stallions, who will both at this point be 8-3 when you include the playoff record. I really, at this moment, I see these 2 teams making it. Quarterback and head coach are, as most people would say, I say the head coach is the most important part of an entire organization. I would even say more so than an owner, because the head coach is the guy that can literally make terrible talent great. And the fact is, both these teams have, I would say, the 2 best coaches in the league. But I give the edge of the best coach to Andrus, who at the moment, saying that how I judge spring football, which is that, prior spring football or other iterations, I think is probably the best coach in spring football. And then they have who I say is the best quarterback in spring football in Case Cookus, and who I say is the best quarterback room in spring football in the Stars, with KJ Costello and Vadley being the 2 notable backups. I think that overall they edge out the Jamar Smith, Alex Magoo, and Skip Holtz-led Stallions, and they end off winning the title game for what would be, if you go to both iterations, their 3rd title in 5 attempts. I just have a feeling the Stars are going to get back and they're going to win it. I think the Stars overall, like I said in my Power Rankings video, I don't see them built primarily to, run the table in the, regular season. But when the playoffs come, you've got a great head coach, a great quarterback. And if that quarterback goes down, I think that Vadley's going to end up being the backup. And I think he's better than Costello. Though Costello, for how much I didn't like him last year, like I said with Brady White, he's going to get another year in this system. So I think that overall, even if he has to come in, it's not going to be the same as it was against the Stallions last year. So I think that overall, I give the Stars the edge. I think the Stars win the title game to beat the Birmingham Stallions for the 2023 USFL title game. So those are my thoughts on the upcoming season's predictions. Let me know what your guys' predictions are down in the comments below, and also what you agree with, what you disagree with, and what I say. If you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We're only a couple weeks away from the actual 2023 season kicking off, and we're going to get ready to do, Power Rankings weekly, week reviews weekly, and all that kind of stuff. And, some series probably come back. In-depth reviews should be coming back naturally, since we're going to have actual football to cover again. So, yeah, and as always, have a great night.